In this episode with Matthew Arau, I was very excited to dive into a number of topics that I hope you're going to enjoy. Steps to living your best life in the morning and really having a great day as a positive teacher throughout the day. How to create a culture in your band room. And lastly, we talked about creating a leadership program in your school and things you can do to really improve your culture through that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to the Growing Band Director podcast. My name is Kyle Smith, and joining me is my friend and colleague, Jeff Smith. Our mission is to share practical advice and explore topics that will help every band director, no matter your experience level, as well as music education students who are working to join us in the coming years. Together, we will discuss many aspects of a well-rounded band program, but most importantly, we will discuss concepts that help us all improve our own programs each and every day. Always remember the famous quote by Ray Kroc, "When you're green, you're growing, and when you're right, you rot." Let's get started. Welcome back, everybody, to the Growing Band Director podcast. This is episode 81, Upbeat Leadership with Dr. Matthew Arau. Really excited for this. And hold on, I got your bio here. I want to read it real quick before we get started. Dr. Arau is author of Upbeat Mindset, Mindfulness, and Leadership in Music Education and Beyond, and the founder of Upbeat Global, and is an associate professor of music and the chair of the Music Education Department and symphonic band conductor at the Lawrence University Conservatory of Music in Appleton, Wisconsin. Whew. Matthew, how are you?
Mouthful. Hey, I'm doing great. Great to spend time with you, Kyle.
Thanks for being here. I will say, I want to start with just a brief question that struck me, and maybe there isn't an answer, or maybe all the answers are in the book, so maybe there are many answers. But my question is this: a good leader leads with a service mindset, right? Trying to lead others all the time. Putting others first is at the core of this. How do you balance this with also thinking about your own self-care?
Yeah, well, I think that's a huge theme in Upbeat, and something really important for us as music teachers to consider, right? Because I think we go into music teaching because we all have big hearts. I think we want to make a difference in the lives of our students. And certainly in many of our cases, we had teachers that positively influenced us, and we want to give back, right? And we have this idealism of, putting folks ahead of us. And what I've discovered, I think the pandemic highlighted, was that if you're always putting everybody in front of you first, you end up putting yourself last. And when we put ourselves last, it ends up feeling like you're a candle and you're burning the candle on both ends. And really, frankly, I felt like it was almost like there was a third flame burning it right from the center. And eventually, we could lose our inner joy, our inner light, and our inner, passion and energy. So while the pandemic highlighted the challenges of burnout and losing our sense of purpose and why, I think the solution is to recognize that while servant leadership is about lifting others and encouraging others, leadership truly begins with how we lead ourselves. And this goes back to that idea of role modeling. So I do believe that we need to ensure that in the day, while our focus is on the well-being and the growth and learning of our own students, that we're also tending to ourselves. And that can take form in so many different ways that we can talk more about, and that comes in the book Upbeat, such as how we set up ourselves for success in the morning, or how we can refocus in between classes, or even in the midst of a class, set an intention for moving forward. But I think it's a great question, and one that we should dive deep into, because we often forget about taking care of ourselves along the way, and how we need to lead ourselves first before we can lead others effectively.
And one thing that strikes me a lot in that too is, and then you become a parent, right? And then you're trying to lead everybody at school, and then you're trying to do the things for your small kids, because of course they start out small and then they get big. So then I was just talking with a student today about the 4 p.m. nap that happened every Friday when I was younger. Like, you're out at 4 p.m., right? It's like no longer, because then you come home and your dad or mom or whatever it is. So So grateful for that answer. I can't recommend the book highly enough. I do have it here for anybody who's watching. Upbeat, well, it's showing up weird on the screen, but and I will highly recommend reading it as I did. So I think the best way to read it is probably if you get on a plane, go to a foreign tropical area. For me, it was Mexico. Just sit by a pool and get drinks delivered to you and just read it at your leisure. I would highly suggest that method for anybody who can.
I think everybody would love to have that opportunity to go to Mexico and drink it at their leisure.
And it was great because the rest of my family enjoys hanging out in the tropics better than I do. I'm not a good hangout person, so this was a perfect thing for me to be doing. Okay, so I thought what we would do is I basically have a lot of things that struck me from the book, and we're going to kind of pull quotes from it and ask you to give some insight if you can, and knowing that we want to leave a little bit so to make sure we don't give everybody the information. But I'm also looking forward to reading this book on an annual basis because I've heard a lot of people do that and it helps them.
That's great to hear.
Okay. So this struck me, and it's about a paragraph long, and I wanted to read it. So hopefully I can. I was really struck with the definition of upbeat because it was pretty obvious to me before I read the book. Upbeat meaning positive, right? Being a positive person and having a positive approach to things. But I was really excited to think about the other things that upbeat can mean as well. So here goes, and then I'm looking for your reaction to this. What does upbeat mean? Well, in addition to meaning a positive outlook, our upbeat is how we choose to start our day, our class, or a piece of music. Just like the conductor prepares the ensemble to play the first note with a preparatory upbeat gesture, we also prepare for the decisions, actions, and interactions in our mind. Every day, no matter how challenging, is an opportunity to choose our upbeat, our attitude, and our intention, with which we embrace the moment. Our thoughts and attitudes are the upbeat to our actions and behaviors, and we have the power and freedom to intentionally choose our thoughts and our attitudes. What we choose to focus on affects how we perceive our circumstances and impacts the people in our lives. So well written.
Well, thank you. I wanted to make sure in the introduction that we got straight to the point so that folks had an idea of where we were going, that it wasn't just preconceived notions of an upbeat person and maybe somebody who sees the world through rose-colored glasses. It's much more than that. And I wanted to connect the metaphor also to, conducting and the conducting gesture of conductor giving the upbeat, right? And in that upbeat, there's so much information, right? But in the upbeat precedes sound, right? So I thought about music when we're, and I'm a saxophonist, so I might use like a saxophone gesture as I breathe in, think I'm playing in a quartet or something. I'll hear the sound that I want to create before it happens. Or I'm also a jazz musician, so I might hear the line I want to improvise ahead of time, and then it happens. And much in the same way that our thoughts, we have the thought and then we speak. We have the thought and then we act. And the idea that we can be more responsible and accountable for what we choose to focus on. Mm-hmm. And as a music teacher, I think that's really important too, because it's really easy to just focus on everything that's wrong.
Absolutely. We're so good at that.
And I certainly spent so much of my time, and I'm sure most of our listeners have spent like a great percentage of our time in rehearsals, like seek and destroy or seek and correct or whatever, right? And I started thinking like I'm just like a fix-it person, like a band mechanic, right? But I realized that there was so much more that I could be. What if I could be a solution finder, or a solution creator, or a lifter, or highlighting what was going well to expand that, to get more of it rather than zeroing in on things that were wrong. And so that inspired the idea of Upbeat. I also had done a ton of research on culture of different music organizations, and I interviewed a lot of music teachers. One of the questions I would say is like, what makes your culture, like what's positive about your music room culture? Like, what do you do? And they all had different responses about that. And so I started thinking about what creates a great culture, and I realized, wow, it comes from the music teacher first and foremost. Mm-hmm. And the attitude of the teacher that we bring into the classroom is so important. So I thought, what if we could take more control, empower ourselves to be focusing on elevating ourselves so that we can in turn elevate our students? And so that's the message, the early message of Upbeat, maybe the message of hope. It's empowering, I think. It gives us back our freedom to take back control of our thoughts. I think in a world where we feel that many folks are actually trying to control our thoughts, or there's a lot of messaging out there, advertising, all that stuff on the media, kind of trying to control what we think, how we feel. And I wanted to take that freedom back and say, you know what? It's up to us to choose our upbeat in the same way that a conductor decides the tempo, the sound, the emotion, the balance, the blend, the timbre, all that we want to have created is in our mind ahead of time and shown physically in the upbeat gesture.
It's a great metaphor. It hit home for me for real. I was listening to Darcy Williams a couple months ago, and she mentioned one time, like, isn't it amazing when you just say in the morning, I'm going to have a good day, how often you're going to have a good day? I mean, the power of the mentality of it is huge. You perfectly, I put a note in my margin here. This is a perfect description of a band director morning. So I'm on page 31 here. For people who don't know, I've just chosen, rather than writing all the separate notes, I've just circled and written a bunch of stuff that I want to try to get to. So part one is called Ignite, right? And in this, you talk about the classic band director morning. Could you give us a big description of what do we see every morning that proves you are one of us, right? When you wrote this, it was clear, like, this is me saying, I know what you're dealing with because I've dealt with it as well.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I can't say that I'm completely free of it, right?
Right.
I mean, upbeat is definitely aspirational, and I'm human, and I'm every day trying to make it a better day. But yeah, it was like the alarm clock goes off, and it's, of course, it feels way too early. Like it's like we barely got to sleep, and maybe a sleepless night, or went to bed stressed out, and the alarm clock goes off. It's like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? You turn up, and maybe you don't even turn off. You hit snooze maybe like 3 times, and you finally roll out of bed. You're exhausted, your bags under your eyes, like, oh my gosh, you can't wait to get to the coffee. And maybe you don't even have time to like drink the coffee at home. So, because you're running late, and you grab that coffee mug, you get in your car, you kind of try not to spill the coffee as you're driving to work. You get to work and you're like looking at the clock. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. I know when I get to the office, there's going to be like a mountain of emails. You get to the office, you're still drinking that coffee. It doesn't seem to be really having any effect. Of course, you got a line of students at the door that all have these questions for you.
Oh man.
And you got to, get in, get set. And before you know it, the bell rings. You're like, oh my gosh, all that planning I want to do, all that score study I know I should be doing, I didn't get to it. And you just power through the day. And at the end of the day, by the time we finally get home, we are spent. And we get out of the car and we go inside, and whoever greets us, whether it's our pets or a spouse or a significant other or family members, all we want to do is just get on that couch or that chair and just collapse. Mm-hmm. Does that sound familiar to a lot of people?
Everybody. Hence the 4:00 nap on Fridays.
Indeed.
Yeah,
Indeed.
And you have so many great things.
So, yes.
You have so many great things in the book that we're going to get into to sort of get out of that mode and help that positive mindset happen in the morning and throughout the day. So I think we're going to get to those if we can hold tight on that. Something that struck me, I did want to mention, you have a lot of great analogies here when it comes to the music making that we make as conductors and how that relates to this approach. Because you're right, when we go to conduct a piece, we've chosen the piece for our students, and hopefully it's at the appropriate level for them for a host of different reasons. We have also prepared the score, hopefully, to the extent that we need to. We sort of have a lot of things we're expecting, and then when we go to start, it's not like, okay, let's just hope something happens when I put my hand down, right? We've prepared all these things. So I like all the stuff in the book that you do to think about. For example, when we sight read a piece with our ensembles, do we expect it to be the perfect performance? No, because if it is, then you haven't programmed right? It's probably not the right level for the program. We expect there to be bumps in the road. We expect it to not be perfect. And at one point in the book, I don't have it in front of me, you talked about the expectation that this isn't going to be a perfect day. And when something happens, how am I going to react to it? Right? I thought the amount of things you did that compare this attitude to conducting is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a section in the book where I call preparing for bumps in the road.
That's it. Yep.
And how we can set ourselves up for success in the morning. in a way. So some folks think like, I'm going to do mindful breathing when I'm stressed out. That's when I'm going to do the mindful breathing, right? Or I'm going to meditate when like everything is going berserk. And what I would share is that we actually want to develop a routine or practice of, deep breathing, setting our intention, whether maybe we do something for relaxation or to burn the stress off. If we have time in the morning, whether that's whatever it is for people, maybe it's like, working out for 10 minutes, or it's stretching, or it's yoga, or qigong or tai chi, or just doing some focus breaths in the morning. We do that before the day kicks into high gear. I recommend don't even look at your phone for a while. Like, don't even get started. Don't check your email. That's a black hole you'll get sucked into. So take care of yourself first. For me, it's almost like this force field, or it sets me up. So when I encounter those bumps in the road or those unexpected events, I think in the book I might talk about like the fire drill that happens in the middle of a class, that you have this great lesson plan and then it's like a fire drill. But if we can tap into that centeredness that we set ourselves up for success in the morning, now we're prepared for it. It's like, oh, okay, I'm just going to breathe through this. I'm going to be patient. Everything's going to be okay. We're going to come out the other side. But if you wait to do like de-stressing breathing until that moment, you haven't prepared, it's less effective.
Yeah. And you talk a lot about growth mindset. I do want to make the connection. I'm totally with you on that. That's why we named the podcast, the Growing Band Director Podcast, because we're always trying to grow throughout our careers. And there's a quote I love from John Wooden that I just wanted to read that I think is so great. When you think about your day or your ensemble not being perfect and expecting that, the quote, I think he took it from somebody else, but he used it in one of his books. I'm not as good as I ought to be. I'm not as good as I want to be. I'm not as good as I'm going to be, but I'm thankful every day that I'm better than I used to be. And I think that quote really sets an intention for, okay, am I better than yesterday? Are we better than yesterday? And as long as we're moving forward, then we're in a good place.
To touch on that, I'll share something I wrote that maybe it was influenced by John Wooden's idea and Carol Dweck's philosophy. And I share this with students a lot. It seems to be impactful. And what I share is that who you were yesterday does not predetermine who you are today or who you can become tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And I think it's such an important message to share, because I run into so many students that they just say, this is the way I am. This is just who I am.
Right.
Fixed mindset. I can't change. That's who yeah. And I'm like, no, that's who you choose to be. And you can change who you choose to be. Tomorrow is a new day. Mm-hmm. Your character's not set in stone.
And you can use that philosophy with your ensembles too. Like, if you accept that tone, you're choosing to accept that tone. If tomorrow you choose to not accept that tone, then all of a sudden the tone's going to be better in your ensemble, right? So I think at one point you mentioned the culture in your room is basically the combination of everything that you choose to accept, or something similar to that. And I thought that was really powerful. You have a stat here about worry, because obviously band directors, I think the majority of good music educators are worry people. We always worry about everything. And then, what did you say? We tend to worry about the future, but on average, 85% of what we worry about never happens. That's amazing. What's the quote?
That's
like, don't worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow has enough. Don't worry about what happened in the past. You can't change it. Only worry about now. I forget what it is. And tomorrow, has enough worries of its own, or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's so important. And what I've heard, to take that quote even further, about 85% of what we worry about rarely or never happens. What I also hear is that generally that extra 15%, even if what we hope doesn't happens, in that 15%, that tends to be sometimes the greatest learning opportunity to grow from. And that's that whole idea, how do we approach what we label as failure or struggle, or stumbling or falling down. It's often in those moments that, while it hurts in the moment and we don't enjoy it, if we can reflect on it, now we know exactly what to do next, or it leads to something super creative in our lives. And for me, and we'll touch on it later, but the development of my whole leadership program came out of sheer survival. And I often think, if I didn't have those struggles, would I have had the creativity or even the necessity to create the leadership program that I did in response to the massive challenge?
I remember Dr. Tim in one of his books talking about the Eastern philosophy versus the Western philosophy, where the Western philosophy, we think of things like, okay, my first chair trumpet player just moved to the town next door. Why us? What are we going to do now? Whereas the Eastern philosophy thinks, okay, now that this student has moved, the next person now has the opportunity to experience this being first chair thing. And I thought that was a wonderful growth mindset concept.
Absolutely.
Can we talk a little bit about the brain science behind all of this? I have a big full page that I thought I should read, but I don't really want to know if I should read the entire thing. Can you sum it up for us? What is the brain science for us non-brain science people?
Well, I found some of these ideas in psychology and positive psychology is so fascinating as I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with, optimizing performance and the power of our mind and the role that our brain plays in learning. As I can tell you are with your podcast being all about growth and reaching higher. So some of the things I read, I thought, oh my gosh, I am blown away by this. I'm going to share this with other people. And I found that other folks are equally amazed at these different ideas. So the first thing I want to share is every second the human brain takes in 11 million bits of information, but we are only conscious of 40 bits. Right? And I was like, what is going on here? Like 11 million bits, that's sounds like a lot. I'm not exactly sure what a bit is, but that's a lot of information coming in, right? But we're only conscious of 40 bits. And so my questioning, curious mind is like, well, what if we could choose what we focus on, right?
Right.
And what happens is during life, we have all this stimuli coming at us, through all our senses, and we tend to focus on maybe dangers, right? For sheer survival, right? There's a lot of that, like we tend to be on the lookout for threats and all that kind of stuff. And I guess when we were hunter gatherers and whatnot, there was like really real life physical threats facing us all the time.
Sure.
And in today's world, we don't have those kinds of constant physical threats, but we do have like emotional and mental stressors that come at us. And we tend to, on average, 80% of our thoughts are negative on average.
That's crazy.
I found that so fascinating to read. And as I share this with other folks, some people said, oh yeah, 80%, that makes sense. Some folks have said, oh my gosh, it's close to 100% for me. So, and so I always say it's on average, but I thought, wow, if we're always focusing on the things that are troubling us, we tend to start getting more of what we focus on in life. Mm-hmm. Right. And so if you change your focus, which is why, I advocate focusing on gratitude and focusing on your successes in the past to inform your mind. Say like, I pushed through a struggle in the past. I know I can face that struggle today. When you shift your mindset, now you're able to find more solutions and be creative in the moment. So when we're in a negative frame of mind, or when we're feeling fear or worry or high anxiety, our amygdala takes over our brain. Mm-hmm. Okay. And this is because of fight, flight, or freeze. And we're designed for this to kind of like a safety mechanism. The amygdala takes over. And when the amygdala takes over, we're unable to use our executive high functioning area of our brain. So what happens is when you can shift your focus to focus on something positive or things that are going well or gratitude, it ignites and stimulates your prefrontal cortex and neocortex. What that all means, all that science stuff, which I know puts some folks to sleep. But it's so exciting. When you use your prefrontal cortex and neocortex, you're actually you're able to think more intelligently. You're physically more fit. That's amazing. Your immune system goes up. You're better at relationships. You're better at team building. You're better at communication. You're better at creativity. Everything that I think we want to. We're better at making decisions. We're better at responding in the moment. And I want to get there, right? I want to be in that state more often. Mm-hmm. And I think we all, as artists, musicians, as teachers, we want to help our students get there. And so Upbeat gets into that, and it gives a very real, authentic conversation. It doesn't diminish how challenging life is, and the fact that our students are going through extreme stress and anxiety as our teachers, and that there is very real trauma in daily lives, right? So one of the strategies of the book is to help us move from that place and climb the emotional ladder one rung at a time, and give strategies to help us move up.
There is this section in the book called "What Are You Broadcasting?" and I circled this part, which is crazy. 7%. Oh, I'm sorry. The surprising result of this study concludes that the effectiveness of communication is related to attitudes and feelings as influenced by the following. So the way people perceive us in our classes and everywhere. 7% by the words we use. 7%. That's amazing. 38% by the tone of our voice, and 55% by our body language. So I'm thinking about like the amount of good information I may be giving these kids is great, but what is the other 93% doing? That to me is fabulous. It makes me feel bad about my teaching, but I think it's really accurate.
As a conductor, it does remind us the power of the nonverbal, doesn't it? And the power of the gesture, the facial expressions, all the messaging that we're conveying. If we only thought of the gesture, how the gesture tends to trump the words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at the end of this chapter, you have a number of applications of things we can do that are sort of tangible things to help in this regard. Are you okay if I read some of those?
Oh, yeah, please do.
Okay. I mean, I don't want to give all the secrets away, but it's important. Okay. So application number 1, smile more often. You will feel great and your smile will light up somebody else's day. Number 2, to prime the mind, recall good feelings, memories, and successes. Thinking about positives in the past stimulates you at the physiological level if you are experiencing those events in the present moment. Number 3, practice taking a breath before reacting instantly. I do that one all the time. A deep breath in through my nose and out through my nose before I deal with the student who is having the issue. Take time in class to ask students to share successes they have had during the week or during music class. Set an intention to teach music from a place of collaboration, and set an intention to begin class looking forward to the possibilities. Man, I just want to put those on my wall and be like, this week I'm going to work on that one. Next week I might work on another one. So good. All right, next we're going to talk about the power of get. Okay, so give us the rundown on that. What do you mean by that?
Sure. And in the book, I share the backstory of how I came to this idea of the power of get. And
I want. Can you do that story for us?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Well, I actually emanated from a journaling that I did on the morning of September 12, 2020. And if we all remember, that was the fall of the pandemic. And I recognize that schools were in different phases at that point, but many were all virtual, some were hybrid. And it was, pretty tense moment for all of us. I was teaching virtually at Lawrence University during that time. On the morning of September 12, I woke up. I live in Wisconsin, and I was looking forward to going swimming in our swimming pool. And being that we're in Wisconsin and the nature of the winters and whatnot, the pool's only open from May to the end of September. So I like to go for a swim every single morning I can, right? But I woke up, it was dark, dreary, cold. It was about 40 degrees Fahrenheit that morning. And for September, that was pretty darn cold because it was also windy and it was raining. And it was one of those Wisconsin rains. It was like a deluge, right? And so I was like, oh, well, I guess I can't go swimming. That's too bad. And so I made some tea and did some, I think I meditated, and then I pulled out a notebook, much like this. I started journaling, and I started doing more journaling during the pandemic. I found myself becoming really reflective, and I imagine many of our listeners did as well. Kind of thinking about some big questions. And since this was September 12, 2020, I actually started thinking about the day before, September 11, but I didn't journal about the day before. I journaled about 9/11. So that was on my heart and mind. And I remembered on 9/11, I was a middle school band director at Walt Clark Middle School in Loveland, Colorado. I was in my 5th year of teaching. Of course, nothing could have prepared me for that day. When I arrived at school, the principal shared with me that somebody had flown an airplane into the Twin Towers, and that's all we knew. The very first thing we thought, maybe it was like a private plane or
a mistake or something.
A small little plane. Yeah, right. And then so I went to my band room, turned on the television, and I saw that it was much more than that. And the towers were, in flames, and it was horrible. And my 6th grade band students were the first bands of the day, so 6th graders walked in, and we didn't get our instruments out. We we watched television in silence together for the 46-minute class period. And at the end of that first period, we saw the first tower fall and crumble in flames. And then the next sixth grade band came into the band room, and we watched the news as it happened before our very eyes. And at the end of that class, we saw the second tower fall. And then I had a planned period, lunch, and then the seventh grade, I had two seventh grade bands, two eighth grade bands. The seventh graders started coming in, and one of the seventh graders said to me, they said, "Do we have to watch TV? We've been watching the news in every class, and can we just make music? Can we play our instruments today?" And I said, "You know what? That is a great idea." I turned off the TV. I said, "Let's get our instruments out, everybody." We warmed up. We opened up our method book, and it was Essential Elements 2000, book 2.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're familiar with that book, number 6 is America. It's in 3/4. And it was the beginning of the year, so it was like, that's where we were. And that was the perfect piece. It's only 6 measures, or 6-8 measures long. But we just played it over and over again. Da da dee da 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 da. I think we probably played it 27, 30 times over and over again. And the same thing with the next 7th grade band, and the 8th graders came in, and we also got our instruments out and played music, and we had an arrangement of Amazing Grace in their folders. And so we played Amazing Grace over and over and over again. And on that day, we came to appreciate the true power of music in a way that none of us had ever felt before. And I, for one, really came to like feel and grasp the concept when they say, like, when words fail and music speaks, or music expresses what words cannot. I truly felt that, because like, if we didn't have music, I had no idea how to put what I was feeling into words. And so as I was journaling on September 12, 2020 about that, and of course the pandemic was on my heart and mind, I started making a to-do list after the journaling. And, I often make a to-do list in the morning, but I added just one word to my to-do list, and the word was get. Something shifted, something like there was a turning point, like a light switch went on. And I thought, you know what? Everything is a get. I get to call Mark. I get to email Sarah. I get to, prepare for classes. I get to attend a faculty meeting on Zoom. And then I said, I get to dance in the rain, and I get to go swimming. And I went out in the pool and I started swimming, you believe it or not, in the rain. And it was like, I'm swimming laps, and I'm thinking about this word get. I'm like, oh my gosh, the word get is like so much energy in this. So I think about all the things I get to do. I thought about the word yet at the same time, and Carol Dweck's The Power of Yet, right? And the growth mindset concept. And I thought yet is awesome because it's about the future. Like, I can't do it yet. We can't perform this passage yet. It's about hope, right? It's about the future. But I realized the get is about the present moment. It's about right now. What do we get to do? And I realized, what if I could live my life with that appreciation of the present moment all the time? And so I assigned meaning to the 3 letters. So G is gratitude, right? To focus on gratitude and share appreciation. Don't hold back. And then E, to live with enthusiasm. E is enthusiasm. And it's really about like being all in, I think, showing up for life. And then T is for treasure. And treasure, I gave that one a lot of thought to decide what T was going to be. But I realized treasure is not only treasuring the folks in our life, and I know the pandemic really helped us reflect on that even more deeply, but also to recognize that there's a hidden treasure in each one of us. I do say hidden treasure because I think sometimes we don't see the treasure that's within us. We don't see the light within. We're always looking outside ourselves or looking for external approval. But there's really this beautiful flame and light within each one of us. I think it's so important that we do recognize that each one of us is a treasure, and that we have something beautiful to offer. And when that happens, and you can see yourself as a treasure and see the treasure within others, it really shifts how you live your life. So I call it the power of get. I call it like living in the spirit of get, or living a get life. And that has impacted so many folks. That chapter 2 in Upbeat has been a game changer. One director, I'll just share quickly, a music teacher in Calgary, I was leading a book study. They purchased 300 copies of Upbeat and gave them to all their instrumental music teachers. And this one teacher she said, Upbeat changed my life. I said, how did it change your life? She said, well, it's chapter 2, The Power of Get. And I said, wow, tell me more. She said, well, before I read Upbeat, my morale was really low. And I think a lot of folks can connect with that. But she said, I read The Power of Get. And the reason my morale was low is because we just had registration. And there were 90 students in my 7th grade band. But after registration, I checked the numbers, only 45 were continuing on into 8th grade band. So, she was really down about that. So she changed her mindset. If she read The Power of Get, she came to class and she started talking about all the things she gets to do. She talked about gratitude. They created a gratitude wall. And 2 weeks later, she goes to the counselor. She says, hey, I just want to see if there's any increase in the number of students that have decided to do 8th grade band. The counselor said, oh, you have about 100 students signed up for 8th grade band now. And the teacher, Harriet, said, what? I only have 90 in the 7th grade band. The counselor says, it looks like every single one of them decided to continue on in band. You got 10 more, it looks like. Harriet found out those are students in the hallway and friends of the band students. They decided to join band just because she made one shift in her attitude and her approach and perspective and started living a Get life. And she attracted all those students to continue on. I just want to share that story because it's so uplifting about when we do change our Upbeat, right? When we choose our Upbeat, we can have ripple effects that go on and on and on.
It's so great. And I wrote down the gratefulness part of it, the gratitude. When you're grateful for now, right? I think you mentioned this in the book. You're grateful for what's happening right now and what you get to do. And then that gratefulness becomes joy. And so to think that this attitude now helps you be more joyful throughout your day, it's amazing. I'm hoping to share the application steps on this one as well, because I think there's a lot of great things that people can do to help with this mindset. And it's funny how, not funny, I mean, it's amazing how many of those I get to things that you remember, because obviously you've read it 1,000 times, but I was going to read those off and then you read most of them. So that's pretty great. Cool. The application things we can do: make a get to-do list and begin each sentence with I get to. Include the word get in your self-talk and when you are speaking with others or teaching, and use the word generously. Generously. So use it a lot. Create a habit of gratitude by accepting the 21-day challenge of writing a daily list of 3 things or people you're grateful for. That's amazing. Share your appreciation and gratitude for someone with them. Don't keep it to yourself, and make sure you let them know. Set an intention for the day to approach every experience with a sense of appreciation, and make get to part of the way you and your students talk about the privilege of getting to make music together. Those are very great application steps. I love it. Okay, so chapter 3, we're going to talk about supercharging your morning, the whole morning routine stuff. And I got to tell you, you talk about stretching a lot. And to me, I go right to yoga because obviously that's stretching and other ways. And I use yoga in my teaching a lot because I'm naturally somebody who is good at athletic things. Like I grew up playing all the ball sports, and I enjoy lifting weights and walking and running and things like that. But yoga is hard for me because, that's just, I'm a guy who has a hard time with yoga. So I say, in our classes, I'm talking about as a musician, there's always things that you struggle with, right? There's always things you're bad at. A kid might have a bad tone or whatever, but I'd say, hey, we're all bad at some things. We just have to work on that. And I always say, for me, it's yoga. And they usually laugh because, that is what it is. But I love that connection. And in the mornings where I can do some stretching and some of the other things you talk about, the day just goes so much better. So I'd like to mention a little bit. Can you walk us through, I know you are not the end all and be all when it comes to stretching, but what's an approach when it comes to a short stretching routine?
Oh, that's great. It's really interesting. And one of the reasons I got into stretching, not only did my wife introduced me to yoga when we were living in Fort Collins, Colorado, but I also had back surgery in 2016. And so getting a lot of physical therapy kind of guided me towards stretches and that kind of really helped the back. And so the first one I actually do is going to sound like it's a non-stretch. Actually, you just lie face down on the ground with your arms on your side, and you're just prone there for just a bit to kind of get everything centered, right? And then I keep my legs flat on the ground and then press up and just arch the lower back to really stretch that and hold that for about 15 seconds and then release it. And then I do it again because I find that lower back, we really need that in our day. That's really, really important. then I also do like cat cow, which is a yoga kind of stretch. I do child's pose
I
as
love that one.
well.
That's the best
And
one.
yeah, so good. Yeah, child's pose is just to relax, right? But it really does stretch your your hips and everything. And I do a stretch to kind of work on my hamstrings on both sides, because we're on our feet and our legs are supporting us so much of the time. We really are athletic as music teachers. We don't often see ourselves that way, but we truly are. And now I'll do a stretch where I reach up real high and then arch my back, and then I do a forward fold and hold back, because I think and then try to get close to the ground and relax that, and then do it a second time. And I do some twists. I do like the arch where you extend one arm up and fold over to get your sides. And then I incorporate some elements of Qigong, which are really helpful. So I actually take my fists and pound my lower back up and down, kind of works on the kidneys, gets a lot of energy going. And another one to just energize yourself in the morning. And I actually do it with students. I actually did it at a band clinic a couple days ago. Just the students were a little lethargic. I said, everybody stand up. And we just start bouncing into our heels, just up and down, just like this. And then you just start shaking it out. And if you do this for like 30 seconds in the morning, particularly if you're like in a sour mood when you wake up, start bouncing. And then you'll just start just being kind of goofy and start smiling. And imagine your whole band is up just bouncing and laughing and being goofy together. All of a sudden you take in like maybe that period that's right after lunch where students are, pretty tired. They, might just had eaten pizza or whatever and they're falling asleep. Just get up, bounce, go back to the music. And that's a great way to start the morning too.
It's so great. It doesn't take a lot of time. You have, let's see, when it comes to breathing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different types of breaths that you mention here. I'm just going to mention them real quick, and then I ask you to maybe highlight 2 of them that you'd like people to know about. You have a focus breath, a serenity breath, a triangle breath, a box breath, renew and release breath, the gratitude breath, version 1 and version 2. Can you share 2 of those with us?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll start with a focus breath, because this is one that's going to have lots of application. Let's do it together. It's going to be breathe in your nose for 4 counts and out your nose for 4 counts. So here we go. And in and out. And repeat. And in and out. And you can just really relax your shoulders, relax your neck during that time. And I usually would take students through that like 3 times. And of course, I can use it myself all the time. And when you do it in a room with students, you'll notice that the focus really elevates. It gets super quiet. You can just hear the sounds in the room, maybe even the buzz of the light bulbs. And students are under a great deal of stress. Whenever I work with students, I'll say, like, raise your hand if you feel any stress during the day. And they all laugh, like all their hands go up, right? And then I say, how many of you would like to have a breath to help you, be less stressed and be more focused? And every hand goes up. I say, well, how many share something? We just do this focus breath. And then I'll go to the music right after we did the focus breath. And the awareness and the focus and the attention to detail elevates tremendously. And I'll tell students, I'll say, you do this breath before you take a test or before you play a piece, and your brain's going to be at optimal performance level. And they can see it, because every single time I do it, the performance level goes way up. But so it works as a stress release, but it's really focuses the mind. So, and here's the added bonus I wanted to share. If there's one takeaway from today, this is going to be it. This is the ultimate classroom management technique. You cannot talk when you breathe in and out of your nose. So now I don't ask students to stop talking. I say, relax, breathe. Let's breathe in our nose for 4 counts, out our nose for 4 counts, right? Sometimes I'll even do nonverbal. I'll say relax, and I point to my nose, and we start breathing in for 4, out for 4. And it's beautiful. So I definitely wanted to share the focus breath. It's a game changer for folks in so many respects. The renew release breath is fantastic, because I think we all want to kind of like just start over and again, right? So what we do is we breathe in our nose for 4 counts, saying the words renew on the way in, like saying renew to ourselves, and then we release out our mouth, just let it all out, go for 6 counts. So the combination of thinking, renew, and release with the combination of the breath is incredibly powerful. Just like a reset. So yeah, and all the breaths are amazing. If you have trouble sleeping, the triangle breath is incredible. And the serenity breath, the in for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. That's one that folks use when they're really stressed out. You just go into your office, close the door, and do the serenity breath 3 times, and you're in a whole new place and come out and be your best for your next class.
And we have the power to not only help the kids, but help ourselves throughout the day in doing that. So just remembering to breathe consciously. I got that from the book big time. There was I know we talked a little bit about preparing for the bumps in the road. I made a comment here, I think there's a philosophy in parenting, right? Where you talk about, do you prepare your children for the road ahead of them in their life? Or do you prepare the road for your children so that your children will have an easy road, right? And I think there's examples of both that you can speak to. I try to, and my wife tries to prepare our children for the road they're going to be on so that they'll have a successful life. And you're talking about preparing for the bumps in the road, and I think we mentioned it already, but knowing you're not going to have a perfect day, knowing the performance won't be perfect and how you react to that is a huge deal. And I wrote in my notes here, music prepares students for this, because their life won't be perfect and their life won't be easy. But if they can improve and start to master their musical aptitude, then that's going to give them the tools in their life to then work through struggle and know things that won't be perfect, but be willing to work for it.
Powerful. Yeah. So many life lessons that we can teach when we're intentional about it. I love that.
Okay, so some of the application steps, and some of these we didn't talk about in the book. Set an intention to wake up in the morning to an opportunity clock. Tell us a little bit about the opportunity clock. I laughed because I don't think I'm going to do it, but maybe someday I'll try it.
I encourage you to give it a shot. I've had folks just make that mental shift of just how they think about it, and it does change how they feel. It's amazing. So the power of words, and I think we're all aware of the power of words. But even a word like alarm clock, beginning the day with alarm, and we think of what alarms are for, like fire alarm, smoke alarm, tornado alarm or whatever. And that's how we're going to begin the day. So I learned this from Zig Ziglar on a motivation CD that I was listening to. And I was driving and he said this, I was like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. So think about waking up every day to an opportunity clock. And it really is when you change your focus and you change your mindset about it. Like every day that alarm clock goes off is a get to, like, I get to have this day, like I get to have this breath. And if we can live that way, we can approach the day from a really positive place.
It's really good. Visualize the day you want to create and imagine approaching your day with energy and enthusiasm. Use at least one of the deep breathing techniques once per day. 2, write 2 positive things you want to remind yourself of first thing every morning for the next month. And last, plan your morning ahead of time. What are some things you can do to make morning routine easier for you, like setting out running shoes and workout clothes next to the bed, or pouring a full glass of water to drink upon waking up, or making your lunch the night before, or anything like that. Those are great. All right, so the next chapter, you start talking about sustaining the upbeat all day long. Let's see if I can find my quote. Breathing. Breathe consciously through your nose, calm throughout the day like music breathes through the piece. I think that's wonderful. Like if I can, in my last period, calmly breathe through my nose and out through my nose, then I know my day is going to be better as that part comes along.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. There's a great book called Breath by James Nestor. And he actually talks about how we're designed to breathe in and out of our nose. That's optimally how we're designed. And when we can breathe in and out of our nose, it stimulates our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the calming part of our nervous system. And so we find ourselves breathing in and out of our mouth and like chest breathing, it actually leads to much more stress. So our breathing and our emotions are connected. Right. And so like when we feel a certain way, our breathing changes. So if we can, knowing that, then we can't just shift our emotions at will on a dime. Right. So if we're angry, try stopping being angry. It doesn't work. Right. So, but what you can do is shift your breathing and then that's the beginning of the process of slowing our breathing down. So it slows our heart rate, slows our blood, or drops our blood pressure. Then we can start scaling back and getting to a more grounded place.
You gave a tip in here under the mental nutrition section, and this was great because I'm trying to do this now. So here's the quote you use. When you do get on your phone or computer at school, open up your torso, straighten your spine, and breathe from your diaphragm to counteract natural tendencies of crunching in your posture and breathing from your chest. Multiple research studies point out that our stress levels elevate when texting or responding to emails, not just because of what information might be exchanged, but also because of how we hold ourselves and how we breathe.
Yeah, that
Fascinating.
research blew my mind. Yeah, blew my mind.
Fascinating. Let's talk a little bit about sleep. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts about sleep, and I think that's one of the areas of well-being that have been neglected for a long time, right? We talk about nutrition and fitness and mental well-being and all that, but sleep is obviously so huge. So let's get into the sleep a little bit. The importance of sleep and ways that we can have a good sleeping habit, maybe at night before we go to bed.
Yeah, well, I'm going to share something that's not in the book, but I think it's a really easy way to remember this. And I learned this from Brendan Burchard, and he calls it 3-2-1. Okay, so 3 hours before going to sleep, no more food. 2 hours before going to sleep, no more work. 1 hour before going to sleep, no more screens. And I just love that because it's easy to remember. And when you do that, you're giving yourself time to wind down, right? You're giving your digestive system time to wind down. Then you're giving your mental, and even that stress level. If we're in work mode and we go to sleep right after that, we're going to sleep with that stress. And that's just going around and around and around in our subconscious, right? And then if you can stop looking at screens at least an hour before, you give yourself a much more better opportunity to sleep, because those lights, those blue lights and the LED lights, are designed to make us stay awake. And so we want to not look at the screen before going to bed. But I would also add that what we think about before we go to bed is going to play a big role in terms of what we circulate in our subconscious mind. So I like to actually think about something positive, such as even about health. Right. So lately I've been thinking I am vibrant health, or I am energetic, and an I am statement before I go to sleep. So that's the last thing that I'm feeding my conscious mind, which of course then becomes our subconscious and our sleep. And then when I wake up, I tend to actually wake up with greater energy because of the last thoughts I put into my mind. Or think about gratitude is another beautiful thing. I'm thankful for this day because of this.
Yeah, and in the book, you give 4 things that we can do as your upbeat to sleep, as we prepare for sleep. So winding down 2 hours before, getting the phone out of the way. I will say there's a couple things I've learned recently in my sleep listening as well. One is to try to sleep in complete darkness. I know some people have little lights. For me, it's our alarm clock. We still use an old-fashioned alarm clock. I don't use the phone in the room or anything. But the alarm clock usually is kind of facing me. So now I've noticed I sleep a little better when I turn it away and I can't just look up and see the time. So that complete darkness is big. And then I'm a white noise person, so we always sleep with a box fan. And I've heard that if you use white noise, try to make it at a lower level. So I guess your body actually sleeps better that way. And I've found a big difference. I'm kind of on 1 instead of on 2 or 3 with the fan, and that's worked. We talked about doing anything the night before that you can, preparing lunches. I won't do lunches the night before. For some reason, that doesn't work for me. I always do it in the morning. But my wife will also prepare the lunch for the entire week on Sunday, so I guess I have it good. Keep a gratitude journal and write it down. 3 things that you're grateful for. Reflect on your day and write about what went well and the people you appreciate. Focusing on that gratitude, is like you talked about, right before you go to bed, helps a lot. And then use some breathing techniques. You say the triangle breath and the box breath are the best ones to do right before you go to sleep. They help you sleep better.
Yeah. I'm definitely doing the blackout. Even because I travel a lot. And I get in that hotel room, I cover every single light, flip the clocks over. I make that room as dark as I can. So that makes a big difference.
Yeah, and some of the application steps from this chapter. Take a personal inventory on how you naturally breathe throughout the day. Place reminders to breathe slowly and deeply, ideally in and out of your nose. Carve out 5 to 20 minutes in your day for a mindful walk, ideally in nature. Another thing about starting your day is the access to natural light in the morning is huge. Andrew Huberman, who's what is he, a sleep scientist or brain scientist? I forget, but he has these talks about this, and he talks about how if you can get outside, like you mentioned here, for that 10, 15, 20 minutes, how it changes your day completely. And then like you are in Wisconsin, I'm in Maine, so like throughout half the year, it's like, I got to leave for school at 7. The sun's not up yet. Jazz band gets out at 4:30. The sun's already down. Getting out for that morning light is a really, really big thing. I try to do it as much as I can. And then beware of the nature of your self-talk and try to revise how you talk to yourself so that you treat yourself as mindfully as you would treat a close friend who needs your support and care. So those application steps are really great, and I'm hoping to take a lot of these and just make posters in my office, put them everywhere that I can. So thank you for those.
Welcome.
All right, let's move on. Part 2 of the book is about inspire, and this lead with a growth mindset. I know we sort of hit that a little bit. I love what you say here in the book. Praise students for their work ethic. Don't praise students for being talented or smart. Praise them for their work ethic. And like, for example, we even have an award in my program for like the hardest working student, right? It's not called that. It's about the students who are just working their best, not necessarily the smartest.
Yeah, I think that it encourages folks that wherever they're at to aim to reach higher. And when we share that somebody's talented, it can actually be limiting, because what Carol Dweck research showed is that when you tell somebody that they're smart, they often shy away from taking on challenges, which might undermine that identity of being smart. But if we say, hey, I really appreciate the strategies you're using, your focus to attention to detail, let's try something a little more challenging this time for you. And we just keep reaching higher and higher and higher. And instead of creating these limiting beliefs where folks either think they are talented or not talented, it turns out that both of those can be limiting.
One of the things, you have a large section in the book where you're talking about listening. And I heard this from my mentor as well, Andrew Boysen Jr., but I'd like you to mention it as well, because this is the second place I've seen it. The 5 levels of listening and how you can use those like within a rehearsal space.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing that when we shift our listening, we can shift the sound of the ensemble, and it's amazing.
It's amazing.
Your group, and
it's amazing.
Yeah, and I like to bring students up to the front, so it's not just me noticing it, because there's such a different vantage point when we're up front as the conductor. So I love to bring in like volunteers. Hey, we get 2 or 3 students to come up front. Let's just listen to how the sound changes. So level 1 is listen to yourself. And I think oftentimes when we talk about levels of listening, we forget about level 1. We oftentimes levels of listening, they don't even include what I call level 1, which is listen to yourself, right? So that's listen to yourself, right? Because that's important. You got to be aware of your own tone and your sound. Level 2 is listen to someone playing the same part within your section, right? And level 3 is listening to somebody playing a different part within your section.
Right.
And level 4 is listening to somebody playing your part, but within another section. And then level 5 is listening across the group to find somebody who plays a different instrument and a different part, and seeing how your part fits with that. And every time you climb that ladder, it changes.
And it's amazing. So if you just have them listen differently, it's like even for younger teachers who sometimes, they stop and they're like, I don't really know what to work on, right? That's something that a lot of teachers deal with. This listening thing is huge. You can just say, okay, I'm not sure what I want to fix, but I want to have them listen more or listen. And it's better. The whole ensemble gets better instantly. And you can choose any of those and it will help improve, because odds are they're not listening the way they should.
Right. And we often will say like, listen more, but we need to be specific. And another quick one is just listen to how your part fits in with percussion.
Mm-hmm.
listen back to the percussion, and you now rhythm's going to improve. You're going to see how they fit together, how they interlock, and it's magical.
Next in the book, you talk about being intentional, and this really struck me, doing things on purpose and writing those down. So there's a list here that you have, I believe, that are for students, and then a list for teachers. And I think these are really awesome. So if you don't mind me sharing them, I would like to. I'll be more aware of how my tone blends with other musicians in my sections. So these are things I could see, like I should put this on my band room wall so they're just seeing it all the time. Students, I will watch the conductor with enthusiasm while making music today. Ooh, that's a good one. When was the last time I had a kid look at me with enthusiasm as they were playing? I'm sure it's happened. I will pay more attention to the space between my notes in the staccato, marcato, and accent articulations. I will play with my whole heart rather than just going through the motions of playing the correct notes and rhythms. I'll be more fully aware of the feelings that the music evokes in my rehearsal. That's a good one. I don't tap into that much. Like, how is this music making you feel right now? I'm not even thinking about feelings. I'm thinking about G flat.
Exactly.
And then you have a list of ones that are for teachers as well, and I highlighted 4 of these. I will express appreciation and gratitude more often in rehearsal. That's such a good one. I'll breathe mindfully through the rehearsal so I'm able to be more thoughtful in my responses rather than reactive. That is a huge one, because how often do we conduct and then we find that when the band isn't sounding very good, all of a sudden, wait, my right arm is like completely locked up, and then my back hurts. It's like this squeezing of the baton is taking out some sort of inner issue that I have with how they sound. And then I realized one year, if I just conduct relaxed and I conduct the way I think it's supposed to sound, I can detach myself, because they still sound bad, but I don't feel bad. And that allows me to then react to them better by staying relaxed when I conduct.
That's a great revelation.
I was like, life-changing. If I can only remember to do it, that's the problem. Didn't happen yesterday. It was better on Tuesday. I will look for the opportunities to empower students by asking questions about what they think and inviting them to listen or conduct from the front of the room. What they think, the tapping into what the students can do already is big. And I think the younger you go, the harder that is to do. Do you agree with me or disagree?
Well, I'll tell you what, depends on, I found that because I get to work with teachers of all ages or all grade levels, that teach all the grade levels. And I'm just always mind blown, actually, by what some of the younger students are hearing and noticing, and like the depth. I was working with this junior high band with a rehearsal techniques clinic in Colorado at their conference in 2020, January. And I had this sense this was going to happen. It's the first time I'd ever worked with the band. And so like the students didn't know me beforehand, so there wasn't any trickery or anything. But I told the audience, I said, when you bring a student up to the front of the room, be prepared to be amazed at what they notice. And it happened before our very eyes. So I brought a student up and they played French horn. And I said, hey, I just want you to listen and just share what you notice and observe after you listen, and maybe share some ideas you think it could make the group better. And this like 7th grade horn player heard all of these things and shared all of these ideas. And I looked at the audience with my jaw dropped, like, and everybody in the audience was like, and I was like, see, sometimes we have no idea what our students are thinking until we give them that opportunity. And often our mind is blown by what they what they notice. And so sometimes they just need to be given more opportunities. And of course, like they may need to have more phrases modeled or specifically what to listen for. Of course, the more they know about music and understand, the greater their vocabulary, then they can start to focus their attention to listen to those things. So of course, it does have to do with our training ahead of time that the teachers provided. But I had some young students that just like, I was like, wow, that's incredible.
So great. The last part of this chapter I wanted to mention was tips in transitioning between repertoire and rehearsals, and how breathing can be part of that. I think you're right. That's sort of an issue sometimes, depending on the day. You switch pieces and like, oh, great, there goes the rehearsal. So what are some things you found is powerful?
Yeah. So if you want to keep that centered focus, have folks do the focus breath while they're changing pieces, right? And then you can say, while you're doing the focus breath, I want you to set an intention for what you want to learn, how you want to grow, or how you want to perform on this next piece. So I almost think of that space in between the pieces as the upbeat in preparation for the next piece. And so often it's just, oh, it's a free for all to like talk and be chaotic. And then you spend the next 3 minutes trying to bring everything back. And so I found that that's amazing. And just breathe deeply, stay focused, because we don't have a whole lot of time in our short class periods.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes we get the students warmed up or sensitized in those first 5, 10, 12 minutes. And then we go to the first piece and then it's chaos.
Yeah.
And we've just lost all of that momentum of, building the mind and the body to excellence. And then we go like 6 steps backwards. But I want to keep a rehearsal ramping up the whole time.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple things that I've done. Sometimes when I have them switch pieces, because for the wind players, it's like a 2-second switch. Like switch piece, okay, I'm on the next piece. Of course, the percussion has things to do. So I'll have the wind players. I'll say, I want you to take the first 8 measures of this piece, and I want you to finger through as many measures as you can before I tell you to stop. Silently. So you just sort of have them focus on that, and that's worked well. And there was something else I was going to share, and I completely forgot it. So, sometimes in between I'll have the piece queued up. So I'll like play a portion of the piece as they're listening, as they're switching pieces, and they're less likely to talk over that as well. So different approach, something else that I've done. I'd like to switch to sort of the creating culture in our ensemble. That the culture really starts with ding, ding, ding. The leader, the band director, sort of like sets the entire culture, right? Can you tell a little bit about the story about how you mentioned earlier in the podcast about how you were in a teaching situation where you were sort of forced to create this culture because of stuff you've dealt with in it, when you got to a new position and you're trying to build the culture. Can you tell us a little bit about that story, giving away the details that you're comfortable giving?
Sure. Absolutely. So I took over the program at Loveland High School in Loveland, Colorado, and the program had been, highly successful before I got there in terms of competitively doing really well in marching band. And I didn't have the marching band background of the prior teacher. And of course, I had a really steep learning curve to get caught up. Oftentimes when there's a director transition, there's a challenge, right, for the new teacher. And oftentimes the older students who are resistant to the new teacher because that's not the way we do it, or we always did it this way,
right.
And so I encountered that for sure in the beginning of my time there, and with resistance. And so there was some intentional sabotage, I would say, from some of the students. And a couple of the younger students, a junior and sophomore trombone section leaders, Brad and Greg, knocked on my office door at the beginning of second semester, and they said, "Hey, can we talk to you?" And about, basically, we're sick and tired of how the seniors are acting.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something we can do about it? And I was
that must have been a great comment. You're like, thank you. Yes, I'm not crazy.
Yes. I know. And so it was like a great learning experience for me about what are the students thinking? Ask them. But they came to me and I said, that's wonderful. Let's talk about what kind of band we want to create, what traditions we want to create. What do we want to be known for? What do we want our reputation to be about? And so we set up a meeting. It was open to every student in the band that wanted to come, and it was after school. And we started talking about those big questions about culture, about who do we want to be? What do we want to be known for? And we watched a video, a short little leadership DVD on servant leadership. Dr. Tim Lotzenheiser talked about this concept. And at the time, that was a new concept for the students. It was in 2006. And I shared this with my students, and it intrigued them. Oh, that's not really the way we were taught or modeled how to lead beforehand. And so it led to a lot of excitement. Then we started training on the 7 habits of highly effective people, and students started implementing some of those concepts into their own life, and they started seeing great success. And through creating what we ended up calling the Leadership Symposium that met every week after one day after school every week, by creating this forum for discussion and conversation and a lot of listening and training, we brought in special guests to talk about leadership, superintendent, principal, school board members, other folks in the community to talk about their ideas of leadership. The culture started to shift in the group, and I gave more voice and empowerment to the student leaders. And through that change, we saw a real positive cultural shift that ended up having ripple effects into every aspect of the program, many aspects that I could have never foreseen, even into fundraising and community connections and the way the rest of the school thought about the band, and the way the administration thought about the band students, and how the students thought about themselves, and how it actually ended up impacting the students as they graduated and went on in life. That the leadership training played such a powerful role in who they became. So yeah, that's how that started. I would say I started student leadership programs out of sheer survival.
Right.
But it really did begin with giving students more voice, but also giving them adequate training. Because what I found is that most student leadership programs, they give the training after they've been chosen. They might send them to a camp, or they do like a one-day training, and then they're like, okay, you're good to go. But I realized that we needed to do the training year-round and set up students before the audition to prepare to be a high-quality leader, and even to define what leadership means. What kind of leader are we striving to be?
And I think one of the things you talk about that's huge for anybody who's going to be a leader is the ability to listen. You even use the quote. I thought my mom made up that quote, so I'm surprised that my mom didn't make it up. But God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so listen twice as much as you talk. I swear she made that up, but I guess she was wrong. So I want to share 2 of the stories from my first job. I'm in my second job now. I've been finished 20 years of teaching. In my first job, of course, I'm 25 years old, finished a master's degree, and I'm in a low income community. And this student comes up. He was a super nice boy, but I mean, honestly, the worst trumpet player I've ever taught. And I play the trumpet, so I fashioned myself being able to help people improve on the trumpet. No matter what I did, I couldn't get him to play anything but C. Right, all the buzzing and whistling and hearing and singing, and he just, whatever valve he pushed down was C. But anyway, so we are at a concert. Of course, he's playing last year trumpet, and we're the day of a concert. In the morning, he comes in and he says, "Mr. Smith, I can't be at the concert tonight." In my mind, I was like, "Phew, thank goodness," But what I really said was, I sort of started giving him a little bit of a hard time about it. Don't you think this is important, or whatever, like the stuff we would say when we're younger. And then he said, "Well, I just want to tell you that last night our house burned down. And this evening, we're going to be walking through the rubble, trying to figure out if anything is left." And I was like, okay, like I'm a schmuck. And so that taught me something. And a similar story was actually one of his friends, another trumpet player, came to a concert that next year, and he was wearing like gray jeans. And so we were like black and white school, right? Gray jeans, and he had a white under tank top on, like something we'd call a wife beater, right? And then he had body paint. His entire body was white. His neck, his arms, everything, his shoulders were all white. And then he had even painted on like a black tie. And he walked up to me into the concert. Of course, we're like 10 minutes from the downbeat, and my ears are like, steam is starting to come out. And I just looked at him, and he said, "Mr. Smith, before you say anything, it was this or nothing." And it hit me, and I looked at him. How long did it take him to do that just so he could participate in this 4-piece concert or whatever it was? And I learned that day, okay, when a student comes up and says something that I don't want to hear, I need to listen first before I give them what I have to think, because usually they're right and they've already thought it through.
Yeah. Wow. 2 powerful stories.
They were great.
Wow. Yeah.
The stuff we can learn from kids. Okay. So lastly, let's get into the part 3 of the book, which is about leadership is about serving others and leading by example. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, in my leadership symposium with my students, we came up with a collaborative definition of leadership, which is leadership is inspiring and encouraging others to achieve their full potential. And one of my students in the leadership symposium had asked me, they said, Mr. Rao, what if all of us were leaders? What if like all of us in the marching band were a leader? And I thought it was a really interesting question to think about, because the traditional model of leadership is, there's a leader, and maybe you have a team of 10 people and you lead them, you tell them what to do, they follow you, that kind of thing. But we had been really thinking deeply about, Stephen Covey's ideas about leadership, and this idea that what if leadership was about encouraging people? What if leadership was about choosing kindness and compassion? What if those choices were leadership choices? What about if leadership was showing up and doing your best? What about if leadership was looking out for a student who might be having a hard time, or a student who wasn't connected, or a student who wasn't sitting with anybody at lunch? What if leadership was going to sit next to them and asking them how they're doing, making those decisions? What if leadership was doing the best you could and practicing at home and showing up prepared and role modeling? What if that was leadership? What if leadership was saying thank you to the band parents who came over and served you lunch during band camp? What if leadership was thanking community members for coming to the concert or sponsoring the band program? What if all of that was leadership? Then you know what? Everybody in the band program could be a leader, if that's what a leader was, right? And so the idea of servant leadership is when you look out for everybody else and you think of your role as lifting others rather than pushing others down. By helping and serving everyone else, it lifts the entire team, the entire group, the entire band up. And it also breaks down barriers that can happen when there's sort of this elitist ideas that can sometimes happen, and cliques that can happen between the leaders and the non-leaders. And so, but when the leaders flip it, it's no, you do what nobody else is going to do. You pick up the trash, not for recognition, but because it's the right thing to do. You lead by example. And leading is not about the glory. Leading is hard, and student leadership is particularly hard. And so we get really real with the students about what to expect and the challenges of leadership, so that students would recognize, I'm not going to go for the leadership position just for the resume. I'm going to become a leader because I care about the success of the program and the success of the students. And I think when you have a shift of what a leader can be, it's really empowering.
And again, I reference an old talk of Dr. Tim that I know very well, where he says, good leaders don't want the credit. Don't be a leader for the credit. Good leaders don't want the credit because, quite frankly, they don't have the time. They're mission oriented, right? They don't have credit. They don't have time to stop and get the credit. They don't want the credit. And that's why good brand directors, if you can do this in your culture, you're not getting the credit for being the leader. All the kids are the leaders. And I think that's huge. In the book, you talk about the 5 levels of leadership. You call it the 5 levels of upbeat leadership, right? So I want everybody to take a stock for a minute. What level would they honestly put themselves at? Okay. So level 1, tell others what to do. Well, my 9-year-old son is at that level. That's good. Okay. Level 2, invite others to do something. Level 3, do the task with those you are leading. Do it with them. Pick up the trash with them. Do push-ups with them. Level 4, ask those you are leading for input. And level 5, empower others to lead. So I'm curious if people are honestly thinking about what they do in their jobs, what level are they at? You're level 5. That's pretty awesome. I strive to be there one day.
Well, if you're saying I'm a level 5, I think I'm not saying that I am necessarily. I think all of this is aspirational. And I do think that we operate in all 5 levels, probably, maybe even throughout a rehearsal. But what's fascinating is that when I do ask students what they think of leadership, level 1 still is the most common form of what students, honestly, when you begin to talk about leadership, honestly, Most people think that a leader is somebody who gets to tell others what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the starting point, right? And then we build on that. And then we start, I actually will share with students, if you can live in level 3 almost all the time, you're going to be a great leader. And that's do the task with those you lead, right? Do the task with your peers, do it alongside with them, show up, just role model. And as a section leader, I'm like, get out your instrument and play with them. If you're teaching marching, don't like hit the gawk block, and tell others to do the marching moves. You do side by side, get the Dr. Beat going so that you don't have to hit the gawk block, and you march, you model, you role model. And if you do that 90% of the time, you're going to be a great leader.
That's great. So I have to tell you, as part of the book, you mentioned, make a goal for your program. And I wrote down a number of goals, and one of them is to start a leadership program. So you've inspired me to try to do that in my school, and I'm not going to be the only one. I'll say we've done a number of leadership things in the past. It's funny how the things you've done in the past, if they don't continue, you're not doing them anymore. It's like, oh, we do that. Wait, we don't do that. Oh, wait, why can our trumpet players not play high anymore? Oh, we used to do lip slurs. We don't do lip slurs anymore, right? The woodwind players used to have really great tone. We don't talk about their tone anymore. It's just keeping that up is the hard part. But I was one of the band directors who said, okay, here are our section leaders and drum majors. Let's train them. We didn't do the proactive approach. So I'll use myself as a guinea pig for anybody else. But without going through everything in the book, what are some things I can do in my school, Westbrook High School in Maine, to start a leadership program?
Absolutely. Well, I like the idea of making it open to everybody from the get-go. And I love the idea of, you could even call them like leadership coaching sessions or leadership forum or leadership mentoring. And let's say your auditions or an application process is early May or late April, like a lot of schools are. Start your training program in January, for example, right? And and maybe time-wise, you're gonna have to find a time that works for you and your students, right? Right after school may not work, right? So some folks find if there's a flex period, or they do it during lunch, or they actually integrate it into rehearsals, 5 minutes once a week. They put a slide with a quote and they have a conversation with everybody about it. So you're starting to just plant seeds, but it really is the upbeat to the auditions. Right. Mm-hmm. It's really the lead in that matters so much. So programs that I've been working with, for many years now, do the setup, right? And the students they either meet at lunch, they meet during the flex period, before school or after school. And it's great because it's students that want to be leaders, it's students that are currently leaders, and it's students that maybe see themselves maybe in a year or two going for it, but they care about the program. Mm-hmm. And you pick a theme, and maybe it's mindset. Or maybe it's teaching, like how to teach your peer. Maybe it's about how to give and receive feedback. Maybe it's about what are the characteristics and attributes of an ideal band member, and why. So you come up with your theme, and then you spend that 30 to 45 minutes to an hour talking about having a conversation. I think also using quotes or take Upbeat and photocopy 2-3 pages from Upbeat. There's a section in Upbeat that's directly written towards the students. It's in the connection chapter. Mm-hmm. I think it's okay. I'll have to check with GIA Publications, but I really think it's okay. I think it's okay to photocopy, like 6 pages in the book, because I wrote it for the student, and have the students read that section and have a conversation about it, or make a slide, or reach out to me and I can help you out with a workbook and all that kind of stuff. For programs to keep the conversation going. But it's so important, I think, for it to be collaborative. That's the key. Mm-hmm. Collaborative teaching, and give your students voice to share their opinions, because we have to model how we want them to lead in our leadership teaching. Mm-hmm. And I think it's so important for our student leaders to be listeners, to ask for feedback, ask for input. And if we want them to live at that level 4, we need to do it. If we want them to eventually get to level 5, which is empower others to lead, which is where the student leaders now have built trust in their section, so they feel comfortable delegating to somebody to lead, we need to build that trust with our own students to say, yes, I trust you because I've helped give you the skills, and I trust now that you can take this baton and run with it to get to level 5. Yeah.
To me, the hard part about it is, okay, I could come up with a lesson, 2 lessons. The planning a full curriculum, right? Because I think band directors are better leaders than they think they are, right? To be a good band director, you're probably a good leader, right? There's just all the things of like, oh, I do that. Well, yeah, I do that. I never thought of it, but I do. Okay, I'll do that. Yeah, but it's not like in my brain as something to teach. So, you mentioned the workbook. Can you tell a little bit more about that? Because to me, like if I had a curriculum or something that I could follow and then incorporate that, my leadership thoughts and quotes and things through that structure, that would be really helpful.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, the book Upbeat, divided into 12 chapters. Actually, you can take many of those chapters and that can be the theme for one day. So for example, like choosing your upbeat can literally be the theme for your first leadership lesson. And you can take quotes from there. When I work with students, I actually teach the students how to conduct and just how to give the upbeat and sing the downbeat and sustain and release. And we'll take them through like singing and doing it mezzo forte, then pianissimo, then in fortissimo. And then the students start to get the idea of, oh, when I change the upbeat, the downbeat changes. Now we take that metaphor into our life. Yeah. Yeah. So you could use literally the book as a platform. Now, in terms of a workbook, I have a workbook when I come out and work with students, whether I'm meeting with programs over Zoom or coming out in person, which of course I do a lot of traveling and working with groups. I always provide an upbeat workbook. But it's interesting that you bring that up because that's one of my big goals is to complete and publish a workbook that would then be available for everyone. That would make it so easy for folks to kind of take the content, boom, right, and apply it. And it sounds like you would love one of those.
I would love one. Yeah, I'd love one. But even just because so much, if you said to a lot of people, build a curriculum for the year for your wind ensemble. That's a lot of us would say, okay, I know concepts I want to teach throughout, but the curriculum is the music we're choosing, right? I'm going to choose this piece and this piece and this piece. And that is what makes our curriculum. I know for a lot of people, their method book or the concepts are more the curriculum than that. But we're so used to building a curriculum through the year musically, the leadership side, it's just a different story. So thank you for that. I wasn't ignoring you. I was quickly jotting down all the notes. But the nice thing about the podcast platform is you've said so many amazing things throughout our time together that people can just rewind and listen to it whenever they want.
Great. That's
so great. Before we leave, any final words you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, I just love that you read Upbeat and that you've been touched by it and that you found value. I did write the book with that intention, to really make a difference and to provide something that has applications, that has reflective questions. There's vignettes in every chapter, that where a music teacher from different grade levels and different subjects reflect on how they've integrated that particular topic into their own teaching. So you can see, like real life examples, which is really, really powerful. But much like the concept of leadership about inspiring and encouraging others, my goal is really to serve and lift others up, and through the book Upbeat, but also through connecting with folks, and I welcome music teachers to connect with me, through the many different platforms, email or social media, and I really am here to serve. It's a huge passion of mine. I think it's truly made such a huge difference in my life, and I want to be able to serve and help others, because I think culture is one of the greatest challenges that we face as music teachers. It's easy in a way to get focused on getting the right notes and the rhythm. That's easy. Like you talk about like a curriculum. We can do that, right? Let's get after the first suite and let's make it musical and phrase and in tune. We can do that. But when we have cultural challenges, that's a bigger question. And I'm excited that we're bringing those topics out and we're providing strategies to help people to work with culture, because when you intentionally work to collaboratively create a culture by design that uplifts and honors every member and every student, that ends up being the catalyst to raise the bar musically, ethically, like the character of the group, that raises the competence. It helps gain clarity for where we're headed. And when everybody has a clear vision of where the group is headed, the motivation increases, and folks show up with enthusiasm and just fire in their belly and more inspiration. And it can make such a powerful difference.
Well, I thank you so much for your contribution to the music education field, past, current, and future. And I'm glad that these ideas that you had the spark to put it on paper, get it published, and push it out so they're not just for you. And I encourage everybody else, we all sort of have our niche within this community. And clearly you've found one of yours. And I would encourage everybody, again, to see the light that's within you and the talent you have, and contribute and help others, the way that you have in whatever speaks to them. Well, so again, I thank you for that. Who pushed you to get it published?
Great question. So again, this started as sort of like a journaling, reflective project during the pandemic. I had been teaching Upbeat leadership for years, and people had said, "Hey, do you have a book? Do you have a book? Do you have a book?" I was, "No, I don't have." My response was, "I don't have time." I don't have time.
Then the pandemic hit.
Happened. It happened, right? And I was home teaching virtually, and there were the gaps. And I said, if I'm ever going to do it, it's now. So I got real serious about my morning routine and journaling. And what happened is I shared some of my journaling with some of my close music teacher friends, and they found it really moving. And they were very encouraged. It's like, "Oh my gosh, I need this. We all need this. Can you keep writing?" And then I shared a Google Doc of it with Scott Rush, who's the author of the Habits series, and Tim Lotzenheiser. And then they both responded so positively. And Tim said he couldn't put it down. He said, normally people send me something and he doesn't have a lot of time either. So he's like, I was going to kind of skim it. But he's like, I could not put it down. And Scott Rush, it reflected that what the messages were really impacting him. So they got me connected to Alec Harris at GIA. And then Alec Harris read the first 4 chapters that were really in rough form at the time. And Alec got really excited about the book. He felt that we, as a profession, it was the book that we needed. It was the right time. That it was something that we really needed that nobody was writing about yet. And so he really encouraged me to get after it. And because I was presenting at the Midwest Clinic in December 21, the deadline was so quick, and it was amazing. It's like, "Matthew, can you get it done by this date?" I was like, "Oh my gosh," right? But I pushed it and pushed it and pushed it. Of course, it was a team effort. My sister helped edit. I had a great friend, Jason Girth, helped edit, and then of course the editor of GIA. But it was a definite team effort to get the book out just in time for Midwest.
I thought you were going to say, "My wife told me to."
Well, actually, let me back up a little bit on to give credit where credit's due on that. The word upbeat is from my wife, Marilee.
Yeah.
And she thought of that word, and she's definitely been the inspiration behind it, basically for everything I do. So I always tell her Upbeat wouldn't exist without her.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.